Welcome to everyone. I'm James Jensen, today's webinar chair. I am a contractor supporting the Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs Tribal Energy Webinar Series. Today's webinar, titled Low Income Energy Affordability Data Tool for Tribes, or LEAD tool for tribes, is an addition to our Tribal Energy Webinar Series and specific to this online tool for tribes. Let's go over some event details. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available on DOE's Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs website in about 1 week. Copies of today's presentation slides will be posted to the Office of Indian Energy's website shortly after this webinar, if not before. Everyone will receive a post-webinar email with a link to the page where the slides and recording will be located. Because we are recording this webinar, all phones have been muted. We'll answer your written questions at the end of the presentation and demonstration. You can submit a question at any time by clicking on the question button located in the webinar control box on your screen and typing your question. Let's get started with opening remarks from Lizana Pierce. Ms. Pierce is the Senior Engineer and the Deployment Supervisor for the Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs and is duty stationed in Golden, Colorado. She is responsible for executing the office's deployment program on behalf of the office. She has over 25 years of experience in project development and management and has been assisting tribes in developing their energy resources for over 20 years. Ms. Pierce holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering from Colorado State University. Ms. Anna, the virtual floor is now yours.
Thank you, James, and hello, everyone. I join James in welcoming you to today's webinar. This webinar series is sponsored by the Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs, otherwise referred to as the Office of Indian Energy. The Office of Indian Energy promotes Indian energy development, efficiency, and use, helps to reduce or stabilize energy costs, enhance and strengthen Indian tribal energy and economic infrastructure, and bring electric power and service to Indian lands and homes. To provide this assistance, our deployment program partners with Indian tribes and Alaska Native villages to overcome the barriers to energy development. Our deployment program is composed of a three-pronged approach consisting of financial assistance through competitive grants, technical assistance at no cost to tribes and eligible tribal entities, and education and capacity building. This webinar and the monthly Tribal Energy Webinar Series are examples of some of our education and capacity building efforts. Today's webinar will describe and demonstrate an online tool available to tribes. The Low Income Energy Affordability Data Tool, or LEAD tool, is a publicly available online interactive platform that provides users insight into various energy and housing characteristics within low and moderate income geographical regions, and based on income, energy expenditures, fuel type, and housing type. The tool developer at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, Vimont, will provide an overview of the LEAD tool and demonstrate how the charts, graphs, and data from the tool can be used to compare tribal information to other geographic regions such as states, counties, or other tribal areas, or the entire United States. We do hope this webinar and the monthly webinar series as a whole is useful to you, but we also welcome your feedback. So let us know if there's ways we can make the series better. You can send any feedback to our main email address at indianenergy@hq.doe.gov. And before I turn it back over to James, I wanted to personally thank Aaron for his time today. Thank you. And with that, the virtual floor is yours, James.
Thank you, Lizana. Before we get to the presentation, I will introduce today's presenter. Aaron Vimont has been a full-stack web developer at NREL for 4 years. His work primarily focuses on storing, sharing, and visualizing public energy data. He is the lead developer for the Low Income Energy Affordability Data Tool. Aaron's background includes building tools to further gender equity in technology and energy and clean water access in developing communities. Thank you, Aaron, for making the time to join us today. With that, Aaron, we'll transfer control to you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lizana and James, for that introduction. And welcome, everyone, to the presentation today. I'm excited to share with you the Low-Income Energy Affordability Data Tool, the LEAD tool. Let's get a little bit of information out of the way, and then we can get into a demonstration. If I can find my mouse. There we go. Excuse me. Okay, not what I wanted. Thank you. So a few bits of information about the LEAD tool itself. So the idea behind this tool is to give more information to users so they can use that information to make energy and income inequality related decisions and programs. So we have all this data free to use, and it's all comes from a couple different sources that I'll get into. And essentially, we want users to have easy access to this, since it's a lot of data and it can be complicated to use. The idea behind the LEAD tool is really to make it so you can understand this energy data and then make educated decisions based on that information. The LEAD tool was originally created as part of what was called the CELICA program, the Clean Energy for Low Income Communities Accelerator program, because it wouldn't be Department of Energy without a good acronym. And this was really aimed at lowering energy bills for low income communities. And the LEAD tool was created to provide data such as energy burden to this program, so that, again, people could make these informed decisions. So as I mentioned before, there's quite a bit of information available that we have condensed into the LEAD tool. The LEAD tool itself has energy and a couple other factors here. All this data broken down at the state, national, tribal, city, and census tract level. It includes income broken into groups of area median income and state median income, which are very similar, and only a few states differentiate their state median incomes, as well as by the federal poverty level. And I'll show you examples of that as we get into the tool. It also has information based on the housing units themselves, and apologies if you can hear a dog barking in the background. Perfect timing. But we do have information on the housing units broken down by owner versus renter, the first construction of the building, and the number of units in the building, and the primary fuel type. And then we use some of the energy information that we have to break that down further to show energy burden and energy expenditures in these various households. And then, as I mentioned before, we do have this broken out kind of at the national level, but includes all 50 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and tribal nations. So this data comes from the American Community Survey, which is a 5-year rolling average of data. So they collect this information and put it out publicly again, and we then take every 2 years to kind of keep continuing our rolling average to get more accurate data. We use that then most recently from up through 2018 to calculate all of the values that you'll see in the LEAD tool. And then it also uses some information from these various surveys to get together details on electricity and natural gas usage. So without further ado, I will switch quickly to my, get out of this, my web browser here so we can see the LEAD tool. Can someone confirm that they can see my web browser with the tool in here?
Yes, it's there.
Wonderful. Okay, so this is the LEAD tool itself. If you need to find it quickly, you can just do a quick Google search for LEAD tool. It's one of the first results that shows up. It resides within the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, EERE, within their subdomain and energy.gov. And so when you first arrive to the tool, this is what you'll see. Well, you'll see a welcome screen, and then you can view this page. And there's quite a bit here, so I'll try to go through it pretty thoroughly, and then there may be questions at the end of it, but also feel free to start playing with it yourself. There's no harm in doing that if you just want to try a few options there. So to begin, you get to the tool and you'll see the most prominent feature of it, which is our map. This, as I mentioned in the slides, contains all of these geographic regions around the United States, and you can interact with them. When you first come to the tool, it will just default to this view of the United States and tribal nations. So you can see just the outline of all the states here and the nations themselves. And as you hover over them, you can start seeing some more data. So this data actually comes in here from one of these options that we have at the top. So we can see our average energy burden as a percentage of income, average annual energy cost, and you can just click here and switch that output. And we also have housing counts as well. One of the main features of the lead tool is that it allows you to filter down what data you specifically want to see. So in this case, it defaults to area median income. And if I wanted to, I could first start off by saying, I want to focus on what I would consider, I'm talking personally or for my organization or whatever it may be. I want to look at low and median income. So I'm going to actually remove everything that is above. Oh, excuse me one moment. Sorry, something strange was happening there. Not sure what happened, but apologies. There we go. Something weird, little issue up in there. But as I select different values here or deselect them, you could see the map actually adjusts to only show data that is relevant to these values. So now I'm only looking at the resulting energy burden of households that fall within the area median income of 0% up to now 80%. And I can add and remove these as I see fit. So we can see here the values slightly start to change. And as you may expect, areas that are lower income tend to have a higher energy burden, meaning that more of their income goes to energy costs than higher income households. And so there are many more filters down here, as I suggested in our slides, and these are all available to add and remove. So again, if you really wanted to focus on pretty specific building ages, our primary heating fuel types. So you can see quite a few options in here as to what primary heating fuel types households can have. We also have our building type here, which is the size of the building itself. So it goes all the way from a 1-unit detached building to a 50+ unit building, something like an apartment building. We also have separate categories for boat, RV, van, as well as mobile and trailer. And down here towards the bottom, there is both also renter, excuse me, scrolling, that's strange, renter and owner occupied housing. So again, if you want to focus specifically on one group of households, you simply uncheck the box and the map will adjust accordingly. So all of these are changeable, and then one of the other features of the map is that you can drill down to get more specific data on an area that you're looking for. And since this is a presentation for folks in tribal areas and tribal nations, I will highlight some of these features. So my go-to example tends to be the Navajo Nation Reservation, because it actually spans across multiple states, as you can see in some of these, and covers a rather large swath. So in this case, you can click on it and it'll show you the average energy burden of the Navajo Nation with these filters selected. And from the filters that we have here, it might be lower or higher depending on other filters that you change. And then you can zoom further into Navajo Nation by clicking on View Census Tracts. So this is a newer feature that we have in the lead tool, and it shows the outline of the tribal nation itself and all of the census tracts that belong in some way overlap or are a part of this tribal nation. In this case, Navajo Nation, like as I said, kind of spans across several different states, and so you can see census tracts that go across those various borders. And we can zoom in here if we want to get a little more detail. And then you can then see the energy burden for these various census tracts within this nation. So census tracts tend not to have very exciting names. The census tract is 9422.01 because I'm actually not sure why that is. But you can see there that it has a energy burden of 9%. And as you move around here, you can see the various census tracts and their energy burdens as a percentage of their income. One thing I will want to note on here is that in order to actually put these various maps into a web-based tool and actually have it be somewhat performant, there's some simplification that is done to these boundaries. So if you are looking more specifically in these areas, you may notice that some of the boundaries are a little squared off, particularly in these smaller areas. So they do get a little bit rounded, so to speak, and squared off, just simply to make it easier for the tool to load on a web page. And this is a representation of these areas, but it's not necessarily an exact geographic match down to the GPS coordinates. So you can see the various tribal nations here. If you need to return to the previous area, you can look at this, and then in this case select a different reservation if you want to. This is much smaller. It's a much simpler example, but there's still the same things apply. There's the outline of the nation itself, and then the census tracts that are inside of it. The other feature within the map here is also some of the states, or all the states, excuse me, that we have. States have a few more options. They have both both have counties and cities as well within their borders. And they also have census tracts. So if you are curious to look at the states, you can do that. These are all the counties in Colorado, where I currently am residing. You have the same option of looking at census tracts here as well. And the census tract view for each state will also have the option to show various tribal areas, counties, or no boundaries that you can see here. If you just want to be able to look at census tracts within certain tribal areas. So in this case, if I hover over it and I'm choosing to view the tribal areas as well, it will show this census tract as well, sorry, I need to move off that, as well as the reservations and other tribal areas and nations that are a part of it. So I will go back to this view for the time being. And then I will scroll down below the map here. You can see it's kind of a wide chart at this point because there's not too much on it. But this chart also will respond to the inputs that you select over here from these filters. So in this case, it's just showing a breakdown of, in this case, the average annual energy costs for area median income. So here in area median income, I have just these three filters selected, and so those are the three values that show here. But it shows a breakdown of the electrical, gas, and other energy costs that go into this value of average annual energy cost. However, we can also switch it to energy burden if we prefer, and that shows the electrical, gas, and other burden for these values. The chart can also add in another dimension here. So let's just do an example. This one's actually a pretty good one. Oh, excuse me, because I only have renter occupied selected. So if I select renter and owner occupied, the chart will show a breakdown of renter occupied versus owner-occupied costs within this 0 to 30% area median income bracket. Same for 30 to 60%, and then we have our 60 to 80% here as well. You can add or remove as many of these as needed, and then there's also an option to add a secondary axis if you'd like to that will show one of the other options. In this case, I'm choosing annual energy costs. You can also do housing counts. And as you show these, then in the United States, you're looking at pretty large values here, but you can see multiple dimensions in the same chart. So the next feature of the tool that I'll get into will highlight actually both something that can be used on both the chart and the map. As you may have noticed, as I was selecting various options here, there is a compare option that you can add. And this works for any geographic entity on the map that you can select. So this could be a nation, this could be a state, it could be a census tract, it could be a county, it could be a city, whatever you would like to compare. But if I add this to compare, it will default to comparing whatever I just selected to the map that I'm looking at. So in this case, I'm looking at the United States. And so now, if I go down here, I can look at my map and see a comparison directly of the United States and Navajo Nation. I have my housing counts also showing up here as the dot on the right side. In this case, it's probably not as helpful given that you're comparing the entirety of the United States to Navajo Nation. However, I could choose to compare this to something nearby. So instead, I could do this example of the San Carlos Reservation, can remove the United States from it. And instead now I'm looking at housing counts for Navajo Nation and the San Carlos Reservation on the same chart at the same time. I could add a third or fourth option if I so desired. Here, we'll just do Untitled Reservation. And then 3 options show up in our chart. And again, I can select kind of any combination of values that I wish to see in my chart, or I can simplify it further if I just want something more basic. I don't want to have any options here. I really just want to look at area median income for these 3 different nations and reservations. So that's one of the kind of the bigger features that some of our stakeholders had requested, is they really wanted to be able to compare 2 entities together. And just as an example, here, I'll just remove one of these so it doesn't get too crowded. I will go into the Ute Mountain Reservation, look at a census tract, and I can, as I mentioned before, I can compare these 2 census tracts on my chart as well, if I so desire. And all of those will just continue to show up here. You know, it's relatively unlimited until you kind of run out of space on your screen to make it visually worthwhile. And one of the other big features that we do have, and excuse me, so one of the other features that we have is the ability to combine both comparisons and filters, and these behave very similarly, but I will go through both of them. So in the first case, since filters are what we started with, we can look on here and we can create our own custom groupings. So in this case, as I mentioned, I might consider this group 0 to 30 and 30 to 60% AMI. I might consider this low income, 60 to 80, 80 to 100, maybe just call this mid, and then we'll leave 100% as it is. And then if I save this, you can see now that the chart automatically breaks down by low and mid groups that I created. And then if I want to add in my 100% plus one, I can as well. And that also is reflected here in the chart. And let's say as well, I wanted to, go back to my combined filters. I want to have another group of, I'm just going to call these old houses, and we'll have a second group that we call new houses. I can save that, and then if I wanted to, I could use that here as part of my secondary dimension that I put in, and now I can look at my custom low income grouping and my custom old houses and new houses grouping as well. Still looking at energy burden and the breakdown there, and that allows some pretty complex customization depending on what you need. And then here's our four comparisons are still happening at the same time as well. And in a similar vein, we can choose to combine some of our comparisons together. So in this case, I could combine any combination of these and make more groups. For the sake of our demonstration, I will just call these ones, use the Ute reservation, we'll just say tracts, and we'll save that. And now here we see our Ute reservation tracts, which are being averaged and combined to now show a custom grouping of these census tracts that I really want to focus on in comparison to these other reservations. So all of this is available to try to make it so the tool is as customizable and helpful to our users. Some of our stakeholders had really talked about wanting to be able to do these comparisons and do some of these combinations, and that is available. I am going to reset here just so I don't have to clear everything out. This is start over. In this case, there's some here are the different income options that we have. So I mentioned area median income, state median income, which is a little lower usage. And then also federal poverty level is another option that we have. And it'll take just a moment here for our data to come through. You can see here, we can add in our tribal areas to our map as needed. And we'll actually make this default in the future. Actually, the only reason we do have this option to exclude it is that if you go over to housing counts, we are looking at housing counts in these various tribal nations and areas as compared to also some of the states. So unfortunately, if you look at these housing count values for these tribal nations compared to the states, the scale is very hard to read. So you can exclude these. And then it just makes the map a little bit easier to read for the separate states as needed, but can also include them to show and get the housing counts for tribal nations as well. Both of these, both the map and the charts have options to download data and an image of the map. So if I want to download an image of it and put it into a presentation, oh, here, let me actually switch to just sharing my whole screen. Hopefully you all can see my big screen now. But as I can download this map, it downloads an image of what you saw before. It does include the date, all of the values that were used to create it. You can get rid of this or crop this as necessary. It does have the scale on the top as well. And the same is true for the chart. Just brings up what you were looking at on the screen with some information about what was used to create the chart. And that same is true. We also have a data download, which will download a comma separated value of the data you were looking at. Let that go. There we go. So, and then this will have the name, the geography ID, which is just a unique identifier for these various areas. and then whatever value you were looking at. So you can see here, there's the names of some of the various tribal areas and nations, the average annual energy cost for those areas based on the values you selected. States also are included in there as well. And this is true for any map that you're looking at. So if you, for example, are just looking at counties in a state, you can download the data here and it will download those values for each county in the state. So if you do need to get some of the more raw values for the data, that is available. Finally, I will just highlight, this goes. We do have a search option if it's needed. You can search kind of any geographic entity that we have on the map. I will stick with, I'll do an example of a track here. I happen to live in Boulder County in Colorado, so if I wanted to, these census tract names are a little hard to read, but I could do this with counties as well. Click on that, it'll automatically take you to a map with that selected. So the census tract maps will default to the states that they are within, but it's still an option. You can search for all of those. Same is true for these various tribes. So if I wanted to click on this one, it'll take us back to, in this case, the full US map, and that the reservation is quite small, but you can see it comes up selected for you if you want to use it. It is highlighted somewhere in here, but not sure which one it is because these are very small. Then we'll remove that. And there is options. So while the last few things I'll show here before we open up for questions, if you are working with one income model and you want to switch to a different one, it's easy to do. There's just an option here to switch to area median income from federal poverty level or vice versa. We also have, sorry, as I meant to show down here, we have some resources down that are at the bottom of the page. This includes an email address you can ask for questions. And then the actual raw data itself for the tool is available as well from the bottom of the page. And these are all of the files right now. These are just large zip files containing CSV files that have all of the raw data that was used to make the tool, and that's available as well if it's needed. The last piece I think will be, there is some other information here about the methodology, a fact sheet, this raw data, and some successful case studies that have been shown that actually have used the tool. These for National Grid in Kentucky are the most recent ones that we have that were created, I believe about 1.5 years ago, and they use data from the LEAD tool actually to create some of the programs and using some of the programs that they have in both of these areas. National Grid is in the New York area, and Kentucky, well, it's Kentucky. There's also an option to do a dark mode to help those who might have visual impairments, to make it a little easier to read. So it has dark on light, dark background on light text, if that's helpful. There's also a save button here, which, my apologies, this is actually currently not working, but wouldn't be a good demo without a bit of a bug. So that will be something that we're adding back in, but essentially this lets you get a unique URL and you can come back to what you were looking at. Actually, my apologies, this will be the last thing that I will show you. If you are working on the LEAD tool, let's say you have a couple items. Come on now. There we go. A couple items compared, and you are looking at a different map. You have these options down here. You've combined these two nations together, so we'll just show these tribal nations. Let that go. Have a couple other groupings that we have. And apologies for the delay here. So we have that and any of the other things that you have selected. If you refresh the lead tool and you select continue working, it will bring you right back where you were. So it'll have everything selected as you had it before, the map you were looking at, any comparisons, filters, things like that. So that's what I was explaining with the save feature. It kind of lets you get a unique URL that you can use to come back here or share with other people. My apologies, that is not functioning at the moment. But that is, I know that is a lot. It's about a fire hose of information. So I will pause there, let people start putting in some questions. If they have any, I'll leave the screen up. I can go through some other examples as we need to, but that is the quick overview of the low income energy affordability data tool.
Excellent. Thanks, Aaron. We do have some questions, but we have a fair bit of time here. So if you have questions to the audience, please do submit them, and we'll likely have a chance to get to them. Aaron, the first question, just a clarifying question. This tool is just for home energy heating, right? It's not like general electric use within your home, like TVs and lights and the like.
Yeah, thank you for that question. This is combined energy usage. So one of our goals will be to actually have a separation of heating and cooling expenditures. It's a bit of a long story, but it's more difficult to get that data than we were anticipating. But right now it does include heating, cooling, any energy data that's used throughout the year. So this is an average annual energy cost.
Okay, so just to clarify, I guess for my purposes now, if someone turns their light on and it's essentially not emitting any heat, it's still showing up as an energy cost for
yes.
the household. Okay.
Correct. Yes. It's a good question.
Okay. So we have a question here on wood. For homes that are heated with wood, how is the cost of wood estimated?
That's a good question as well. From my understanding of it, that comes from, so there are surveys that people put out. Some of, sorry, I'll back up for a moment. We do gather the information from the Census Bureau, and part of that is the surveys that ask how much energy usage do you have, or do you use? And so part of that would be that person would likely put in, I spend X number of dollars a year on wood. So that's where that value comes from. And then we do some calibrating and confirmation to make sure that the values that people put in these surveys do seem to match what utilities report as well from some of these areas. So we do kind of calibrate that, but that data does come from the survey, the users of the survey itself.
Okay. Another specific question here where it talks about for area median income. I guess where the tool talks about that, and I don't know exactly where that was. How is the area defined, and would the area include the whole tribal area?
So the area median income, excuse me, let me just double check on this. So I apologize, I don't know exactly how they define these areas. So I may have to follow up on that, but it's not, in this case, it's not using area median income, or the area of the area median income as the tribal nation. I believe it's at it's county or census tract level. I would have to get some more information on that. I'm sorry, I don't remember off the top of my head.
No problem. New question here. Can you explain the column headers on the Excel downloads? or is it referenced on the site?
Yeah, so the column headers in the download should match what you had selected if you were looking at the map. In the example I had downloaded the final column will be the value we're looking at, which would be energy burden, housing counts, or average annual energy cost. The other one that is listed in there that might be a bit confusing is the geography ID. And this is essentially what's used by the Census Bureau to label a census tract or a county or a state. The names themselves are just, pulled from whatever the Census Bureau had stored for that area. In the case, in one of the examples that I was downloading it kind of at the view from the United States, and that shows the names of the states as well as the names of the nations. When you get farther down into a map and you're looking at just the census tracts, potentially the geography ID and the name are not necessarily quite as helpful. They're kind of long, but they are the values that are used by the Census Bureau to distinguish these various regions.
Thanks. Another question here, are you able to show trends? For example, like identify where areas where costs are increasing the fastest or the slowest, or anything in that, or is it just current, the most recent data?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do have an older we had older data in the lead tool, and it's just not something. The trends is not something we have the ability to support at this moment. But that I have heard that before, and I do really like that idea. So it may be something. There was I apologize, I forgot to go to a slide towards the end of mine that was talking about some of our future plans for the lead tool, and that actually kind of ties into that piece of it, which is we are going to be doing some updates to the lead tool this year, and one of the big features that we want to do is add some different layers that you could put onto the map. One specifically that had been requested that we include would be information on demographics and race. So you could look at a map and see energy burden, and then layer on top of that layers for different demographics. And so in a similar fashion, if we were to add in, let's say, if we were able to get some information, I don't know exactly where off the top of my head, but if we were to calculate it maybe from previous lead tool data to current lead tool data, or there's another data set we could use, that could be something we could add into as a layer on the tool, and we'll certainly keep that in mind. I really like that idea that we show trend lines or some sort of indication that says, these are the areas that seem to have decreasing energy costs, and these are the ones that seem to have increasing energy costs.
Great, yeah. So keep paying attention. It might functionalities are changing, so that's great. A new question here: how, if at all, do the lead tool and NREL's slope tool interact, align, or share data?
Love that question. Also, not the first time. Yes, I do work with or have conversations with members of the slope tool. So the slope tool does use some lead data. It's more at a higher level. It doesn't break down in the same way. But as I mentioned, we're planning on doing some updates this year. And part of that will be to make it a lot easier for anyone to access some APIs and get to the lead tool data. And that will include, hopefully, the slope tool. And we'll be working a little more closely with that. And then part of our updates will be making sure that users can get from one of those tools to the other. So one of the main differences in them, and why it's not as easy to combine them maybe as we would want, is that the lead tool is a little more static. It's looking at existing data, and the slope tool does do some sort of future prediction and estimations, and we want users potentially to be able to go from one tool to the other or back and forth as necessary. So we will be connecting them more closely. They were developed a little bit separately, and then we want to kind of bring them back together now. So ideally, what we would do is have somebody say, I'm looking at these, 10 census tracts in the lead tool, and now I want to go to the slope tool and look at more, future information about that, or get some information about what types of renewables potentially to use in these areas. So we could just send users right to the slope tool as a way to do that. And so that's, again, these are great questions, and we will be hopefully putting that in sometime in the next year.
Thanks, Aaron. Could you briefly explain what the slope tool is for those of us that aren't familiar with it?
Yes, I will do my best. The slope tool, I want to get the acronym correct, so one moment. There we go. It's the State and Local Planning for Energy platform, so SLOPE. So this is, again, it's not quite as detailed as the lead tool. It operates more at the county level, but this does help users find potential energy efficiency and renewable energy and sustainable energy solutions for their region. So they can go to the slope tool and select, excuse me one moment. Yeah, there's a lot of different options in there, but one of them is economic potential. They have PV potential, so solar, photovoltaic potential, wind potential, bioenergy, those kinds of things. So essentially you can plan to say, okay, what, just as an example, what renewable energies would work well in these areas. And so combining that with the lead tool, the idea would be, okay, we found these areas that have high energy burden. What options do we have to reduce that energy burden? And one of those solutions could be going to the slope tool and using the planning features of it to say, okay, I know that these 5 areas have high wind potential and these other 2 areas have solar potential. And so we may be able to install some options there to decrease energy costs for users, just as an example. But that is a rough overview of the slope tool, and apologies if anybody listening has a better example of that.
No, thanks so much. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot with that, but just
I just haven't had to get a good description like that before. It was good.
Can you see which census tracts are located near a natural gas pipeline, for instance?
No, not currently. However, I do also really like that idea. We may be able to get to a data set that would allow us to put that in there. So again, we want to be able to put more layers on the tool as we go forward. Distance to natural gas pipelines, or I guess any of those other kind of fossil fuel infrastructure could be very, very helpful. So I really like that idea.
Yeah, sounds good. So it looks like we have Adam, I'm not gonna get your last name right, but he's the NREL slope tool person on, and he would like to answer the question on slope tool. So I'm gonna try to unmute you.
Apologies, Adam.
And so Adam, I just unmuted you. You can talk briefly about the slope tool.
Yeah, just I'll answer very quickly. Hey, this is Adam Guzzo. Actually work at the Department of Energy, and I'm the lead for the slope platform and the DOE lead for the lead tool as well. So Aaron, thanks for fielding these questions. Just very briefly, the slope platform is a future scenario or modeling tool. and it integrates data on energy efficiency, renewable energy, and sustainable transportation. So it's got data across all sectors. And as Aaron was mentioning, right now on what we call the data viewer part of the platform, which is the existing kind of tool within the Slope platform, you've got data across energy efficiency, energy consumption. You've got data on energy efficiency. There's a bunch of data on energy generation across a number of different renewable energy technology areas. And then you've got also some generation scenarios that range from like low and high demand growth to low and high renewable generation, and a little bit of demographic data. And then we're going to be adding actually a scenario planning tool to the platform by the end of the year that'll be really exciting and actually allow users to select data down to the county level, so state and county level, and actually look at projected energy use scenarios for both consumption costs and emissions, again, at the state and county level, and look at how those scenarios interact and change based on different selections that you make within that scenario planner functionality. So I would think of the Slope as kind of a higher level planning tool, and then obviously LEAD allows you to drill down and look at more specifics related to energy burden and sort of think about policies and programs specific to that. So I'll leave it there.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Adam. Glad we could pull you in for that answer, and perhaps sometime in the future we can, highlight the Slope tool in the webinar series. All right. So, Aaron, let's see if we have any additional questions at this time.
Hey, James,
no,
this is Lizana. James, while you're looking for questions, I did also want to let the audience know that we have a tribal energy atlas, which might be another tool that might be of interest. It is a interactive geospatial application, and it's basically uses energy resource information, infrastructure, both conventional and renewable, has transmission lines, railroads, environmental data such as water availability, protected areas, energy efficiency, electricity and natural gas prices, and more. So that might be another tool. It was made specifically to assist tribes in their energy planning and options as well. So that could be reached from the Office of Indian Energy website, Tribal Energy Atlas. Check it out.
Thanks, Lizana. And with that, we don't have any current additional questions. Aaron, I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to cover before we wrap it up.
Nothing major. I do want to thank everyone for their time and for coming on here. As I mentioned, always available for questions and ideas. This tool is for users, for stakeholders. We want people in here and using it and coming up with some of the great ideas that you already have. If you have others or questions, concerns, definitely reach out. We always appreciate feedback and ideas, and we just want to make it a better tool, a more useful tool for people in the future. So thank you all for your time.
Aaron, before you go, we just had a question come in.
Of course.
And you touched on this, but maybe you can cover it in a little more detail. Can you summarize planned changes for LEAD?
Of course, yes. So the biggest changes that we are planning is more specific to adding more data to the tool. So as I mentioned, we would like to add a layer so you can look at demographics and maybe select which demographics you are kind of interested in viewing. And that would be just data that shows up on top of the map in addition to some of the energy burden and other data that we have. Some of the other plans that we have would be potential transportation costs, unemployment data, any other kind of economic affecting values that would tie in with the lead tool pretty well. So that's one of the biggest plans that we have. And then the other one will be, as I mentioned, making it a lot easier to access this data. Right now we have access to just kind of the raw data for the public, and we will be opening it up to have these public facing APIs, as well as make public the actual code that we use to generate the lead tool data, so that people can make some tweaks to values and have the data be more impactful for what they need. More specifically, we do break it down by area median income and federal poverty level, but there may be an option that's more specific to your use case, where you want to focus on incomes less than X amount, and then you would be able to actually curate the data yourself. Or if you want to just focus on a very small area, you don't need to do it for every census tract in every county and every state and every nation, everything like that. So those are the biggest changes, would be better access to the data and then more data itself in the tool.
Excellent. Thanks, Aaron. Oh gosh, I was just about to say we're done, but sorry, long question came in. Let's see.
That's fine, no problem.
Would it be possible to have 1 decimal point of precision at the census tract and county level? It makes sense when comparing at a higher level, such as states, but understanding whether it's a 3.4 rounding to a 3 versus a 3.5 rounding to a 4 at the census tract level.
That is
an
excellent question. That's a little bit tricky in the answer, in that we are hesitant to show a lot of precision in the tool, in that you're looking at surveys done across the all these different areas, and we do have a number of the survey counts that are associated with it. So I didn't actually get to an example in the tool, but if you end up selecting the fewer filters that you use, the fewer surveys that were collected to create that information. And so because we are actually kind of aggregating up from or aggregating all these values together, it could be that there was a very small number of surveys used to represent the values that you're seeing, and so we don't necessarily want those to I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. We don't necessarily want those to take over what the values of the actual values for that census tract are. So we purposefully did a little less precision on this to show. However, I will talk to our data expert for the lead tool, Uki Ma. I don't know if anyone else is familiar with his work that's on the call, but he's been great and a very valuable person supporting the lead tool, and has done all the data for it. And I can ask him about that, because it may be possible to start showing more precision, especially at or probably only at the census tract level. But at this time, we are kind of purposely not showing too much precision, because there's a potential that the data was collected from a very small number of surveys, and it could be kind of skewing the results.
Excellent. And one more follow-up question on the upcoming changes. Do you have any idea when the changes you talked about will be made?
Yes. So the public API piece with the lead tool data should be available early next calendar year, probably within the first 3 or 4 months. And then the other plan changes for the different layers on the tool will be ready towards the end of the fiscal year.
Excellent. All right, now there does not appear to be any additional questions. So I want to thank you, Aaron, for your time today and for informing us about this exciting tool. To our audience, we're very interested in your suggestions on how to strengthen the value of these webinars, so please do send us your feedback. And on our final slide, if we can bring that up, it shows the remaining webinar of the 2021 series. The next and final webinar is titled Utility Scale Solar Development on Tribal Lands. It'll be held on December 8th at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, so that's next Wednesday. Thank you again for your interest and attendance today. We look forward to you joining us in future webinars. This concludes the webinar for today. Good day.